And welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the High Low Sports Podcast. We appreciate y'all for hanging out with us on this Wednesday evening. If there's one of your favorite places to listen to podcasts later on in the week, hopefully you all had a very happy Turkey Day week for those of you who do celebrate. And those who don't, well, hopefully just enjoyed the time off. Is DJ joined as always by my co-host, Kelcey. And Kelcey, fresh back off the road in Columbus, maybe throwing in an application for Ryan Day's job, who knows? But glad you're able to make it with us and conquer that Northeast Ohio snow.
Yeah, another snowstorm rolling through, but you know what? It was the storm down in Columbus that I was excited to talk. But yeah, I was just kidding. I wasn't down there for a job. But God, if they offered me the opportunity, I would happily sit down. I don't think they need Chip Kelly and Ryan Day anymore. That's obvious. 1-4, man. That's a wild stat line compared to the rest of his stat line.
Absolutely. And we're definitely be talking more about them later. Don't worry, everybody. Like, we will definitely get to that interesting weekend event in a little bit, but we got plenty of other stuff to go through. We also got Conference Championship weekend coming up, which Ohio State will not be playing in because of recent events. We got some movement in the NFL. We got some hard-hitting stories to tackle, is what we'll call them. And then we're going to be talking about some awards, but it's going to be a football-centric show today. So those of you who are a big fan of the pigskin, buckle up. This one is just for you guys. But without further ado, we're going to go and get right into it with our segment named after a basketball set part is in the tip-off, brought to you, of course, by SeatGeek. Use code HighLowSports. Get $20 off your first set of tickets on any sporting event, concert, or just about anything that requires any type of ticket. Go to SeatGeek and get yourself $20 off your first order. And we're going to go and jump into the NFL. And I think the big story, the hard-hitting story this week was, of course, Azeez Al-Shaair and his hit stick directly to the face on Trevor Lawrence, sending him into the fencing position and effectively ending his season as he does head to the injured reserve. Shaair suspended 3 games after the hit. A lot of commotion after this one, a lot of talk about it. What we talked about in the group chat, it was an instant, oh my God hit. Like, that's the week. There's kind of one you knew when it happened. That's the end of Trevor Lawrence's season. No matter what, once we saw that one, it was done. But first thing, we'll kind of focus on the first part is 3 games. Do you think that's enough, too many, too little, or just about right at this point?
I think it's too much. I don't know. I feel like Azeez is being suspended because of the look of it. And I don't think anybody is holding accountable Trevor Lawrence. And I think that's an important part of this. Trevor Lawrence is equally responsible for this moment happening as Azeez is. Because if I think I've seen this replay 1,000 times by this point. That is the equivalent of a bang-bang play. That is a guy is going down to tackle, and that's when Trevor Lawrence goes into his slide, running full speed. He didn't slow down, didn't do any of that thing, didn't give all the telltale signs of giving himself up. He slid late. He got hit in the head because the target that Azeez Al-Shaair is aiming for now, based on all the running rules, is low. That's where he has to hit. So now all of a sudden, Trevor Lawrence drops his body, gets in the position there. It's a tough situation. I do think he deserves to be suspended a game. I'm not going to let's not get twisted. I'm not saying he doesn't deserve to be suspended a game, but 3 games is crazy. That's too much. And again, I think, obviously, hopefully Trevor's okay. That's a huge hit. That's something we never want to see in the NFL. But it's like, we can't all have a reckless quarterback. We don't need more Andrew Lucks in those situations where they are absolutely dynamic, but they get themselves hurt. We don't need that. We don't need Dak Prescott getting himself hurt. We don't need Josh Allen going out there. And while Josh has not had the same problems, he does the same things. Just a reckless abandonment for your own life in that case. Tua, obviously, we've talked about that ad nauseum. Quarterbacks should not be treated as just a Barbie doll that's out there. They are a football player. You are a football player. I mentioned Andrew Luck. Obviously, his Stanford role now is, he talked about in an interview with Dan Patrick that he was a football player. These guys are football players. They know the rules. They know how to take advantage of them. And the NFL, do what they do with the rules. We'll talk about that in a minute, I imagine. But, I think it's a situation where you, as a quarterback, you have to be more aware. You have to know, if I slide late, I am going to be hit. Just like in the early 2000s, 90s, and before, you throw a pass over the middle, high, late, or behind somebody, your receiver is going to the hospital. you have to know these things and be aware of these things and protect yourself and protect your teammates. Because right now, what does this do for Jacksonville? Is it puts Mac Jones in the role, which is great for Mac Jones because he has an opportunity to show out. But for the rest of Jacksonville, they were already trying to scrounge something out of the season, and now you're scraps. You're in backup mode right now. And for Houston, obviously, yes, Azeez shouldn't have done it. That doesn't change the fact he's going to slide. You should not still try to tackle somebody. But given the rule changes that we've had to this point, he has no choice but to do that because, as we've seen, Patty does this all the time, where he will deke out defenders, especially going to the sideline, who think he's going to give himself up, and he will then run upfield for another 20, 30, 40 yards. And so this is a situation with Trevor Lawrence, who does have the ability to run. I think you have to try to lay a hit on somebody. Now, again, I don't think the hit should have ever happened, but I think there's 50-50 blame here. I don't think it's one side or the other. And so Azeez getting 3 games while Trevor gets 0, obviously Trevor being injured, put him on IR, fine. But 3 games is way too much for this. This is, and especially John Runyon handing out the penalty. I've said this every time John Runyon hands out one of these things. That is not the guy I ever want to see handing out a penalty or handing out a suspension for an in-game tackle that's considered egregious. That dude was the definition of egregious as a football player. So, anyways, I digress. But yeah, no, I think it's too much.
Well, you took all of my notes here, so I'll just be throwing that off to the side, and we'll be just going off the cuff here. But the first, I'll go ahead and just go down my bowl list. 3 games, a little bit too much. I think 1 or 2 would have sufficed, mostly because of the extra forearm and then the launch into it. It's Trevor Lawrence's fault for sliding. It was the little, if he just ran into him, dove into him like a normal tackle, completely the same. But I think with that extra forearm shiver to the head, plus the little bit of a launch that he did, I can see why you get a game for that. Plus, he's been active this year too. He's been active. I mean, punching Roschon Johnson earlier in the year, choking Tom Brady when he's at the 49ers. He's an active guy out there.
I believe he was the one that also threw the punch in Josh Allen's face. No, they didn't play Buffalo. I'm trying to remember who. No, never mind. I know who that was. That was Drew Tranquil from the Chiefs.
The point is, he's been involved. He's been involved. So I get it where there's a little bit of what you've done and this on top of it. Like you said too, Trevor Lawrence, you got to slide earlier, or you just got to prepare for a hit stick. Basically, it's bang bang for everybody. That's why I think 3 games when there's 4 games left, 5 games left. I think maybe 4 because they have a bye week. A little much because you're basically saying your regular season's over. At the same time, though, I get it because he did add a little bit of extra sauce in a situation where you didn't need the sauce. I think the hit was inevitable. Either way, I think 1 to 2 games would have been more suffice. What I will mention, though, is shout out to Evan Ingram, because as soon as that went down, that was the first man fighting for his quarterback and throwing hands. Evan Ingram gets a bit of a bad rap from his time with the Giants. I think he's made up for a lot of that in Jacksonville, both with his hands mostly, and now with his hands. So obviously we kind of agree that Trevor Lawrence is partially at fault here. Regardless, when your quarterback gets hit like that, you must fight that man. And shout out to the Jaguars because they did it. How many times have we seen a few years ago when Kayvon Thibodeau killed Nick Foles, he was laying there dead and nobody on the Colts pushed him or did anything. The amount of times you see basically your quarterback toast on the ground and nobody's doing anything about it when it's a quote unquote cheap shot like that. We saw it with the Bears and the Lions on Thanksgiving. That's when it's like, all right, they believe in Caleb Williams because that almost late hit, kind of right on the edge, they were ready to fight for it. That's what you want to see. So shout out to Evan Ingram, the tight end, leading the charge. And then everything else after that. That was my biggest issue with this, I think, is more of D'Amico Ryans and the GM afterwards, more or less saying how dare Jacksonville start going after him afterwards. It's like, D'Amico, you were a linebacker from Alabama and with the Texans and a multiple-time All-Pro. If someone did that to C.J. Stroud, you would look at Laremy Tunsil and say, I will pay your fine. You fight that man. You would look at your offensive lineman and tight end if someone did that to C.J. Stroud and be like, good, if the exact roles were reversed. So let's chill with that part a little bit where it was trying to basically pass the buck. I get what he was saying. His guy got suspended. Didn't like it. All of that was accurate. Shout out to Evan Ingram, and let's not lose sight of it too. When your quarterback gets hit like that, you must fight the guy who did it. Rules are rules since the time I was a kid playing in the playground to the time I'm an old-ass man. Rules are rules, and they are meant to be there. Those ones stand through the test of time, guaranteed.
Yeah, I totally agree in the fact that, yes, everybody should have reacted the way they did for the on-the-field situation. Brandon Scherff doing what he did, Your round of applause, sir. I appreciate you protecting your quarterback. Obviously, your quarterback got killed, but that doesn't change the fact that you still tried to stand up for him afterwards. I do want to address the forearm thing, though, right? Because that's a part of this that everybody's looking at. Like, oh, he threw a forearm. That man goes in without the forearm. He hits him helmet to helmet. And we're talking about a completely different situation here. The forearm is there, and I've seen this before in many, and again, this kind of goes to Trevor not giving the signs of him giving himself up, which is slowing down and then breaking himself into a slide. A lot of defenders use the forearm to stop the quarterback so they don't get undercut, lose their legs, get hit in the cojones, insert whatever reason why, but they use the forearm to stop themselves from getting a targeting penalty, which is going to come if you don't put the forearm up, which is kind of the screwed up situation in all of this. They're like, given the rules of giving yourself up and given the rules of tackling now, there's no good current measure to fix that. And I think that's that's part of the problem with it. Like, you see a forearm, supposed launch, things like that. It's hard to say a guy who was in a, standing up, and then all of a sudden going down into a low crouch, like tackling somebody's legs, would not launch a little bit. It's hard to say that he wouldn't do that, just given the physics of it. Your body naturally will compress and then decompress, which will give an illusion of a launch. So I don't know. Don't want to take anything away from Azeez shouldn't have done it, but there's a lot of explanation in this, especially when you watch it enough times, that it's just like, all right, well, this sucks, but it's football. Let's not forget at the same time. And then, if we're going to talk about actually protecting people, let's not put the blame all on one side. It needs to be two-sided in the blame. But yeah, no, I think everything else, I think I totally agree with what you said.
Which is good, pretty much a segue into our next part of the topic of, should they change the slide rule? The rule about being able to slide like that, give yourself up, can't touch them in. A lot of the talk has been, especially from some prominent people, of like, hey, this rule is stupid. Take it out. If you want to avoid a hit, fall down, truly slide earlier, fall down, get out of bounds, take a knee, whatever it is, or do like what Cam Newton, Anthony Richardson, Josh Allen do. You're a ball carrier at this point. You duck your shoulder, you get low. Like what running backs do, you basically, for lack of a better terms, dive at their ankles to get yourself down. Whatever it is, something like that, maybe taking out the slide rule. I don't really hate the idea. I get what the idea is. Obviously, people are still going to slide when they give themselves up. They're just going to do it well before any opportunity of contact, hopefully, at this point, like it's supposed to be, because they know if you slide like that, you're not going to get the benefit of the doubt, and it leaves you incredibly vulnerable, as we have seen 1,000 times over. Cam Newton got decapitated when he was against, I think it was Kelcey, when he was with Atlanta. You are the most vulnerable of your life when you're doing a baseball slide in an open football field with 20-mile-an-hour athletes running at each other. The slide is the worst idea to protect yourself unless you got some distance. Or if you're Tom Brady and you stick your cleats up in the air and hit people in the cojones and the knees and end up having to cause people to get surgery like Ed Reed. But just saying, Tom Brady, I know you're the most vocal about this rule, but let's call a spade here. He was right, though, in that you need to call it both ways. So I do agree with him on that. I'm pointing out the irony because that's what I'm here for. But I think tweaking the slide rules, it should be in the cards.
I think that's an important point to throw out there. There should be accountability held on the field for a quarterback who intentionally slides late. I think that needs to be. Yeah, it just makes everything so much scarier, so much more dangerous. That's how you get Tua injuries. That's how you get what happened to Trevor Lawrence all the time. And also it makes things more egregious for somebody like Patty when he fakes going out of bounds and then decides to run out of bounds. You can't do that anymore. If you fix this rule and you hold the offense accountable, just like you should hold them accountable for offensive targeting. I think that should be something. If we're going to talk about this, we need to have the same conversation that this does evolve beyond just the slide rule, but the offense needs to be held accountable for these things. If we're going to put all the blame on somebody for this situation, it needs to go both ways. You can't just do that. You can't just put it all on the defense. You can't hold the defense accountable, because at this point in time, the next logical step, if we're going to hold the defense accountable and only the defense accountable, all right, guys, we're playing touched football. That's it. Or we're going to completely take out the rule about giving your body up. You can literally, you touch the ground, it's college football rules. Your knee touches the ground, you're done. Nobody can touch you. That is the only way to take this slide rule out without impacting the offense. If you don't want to put anything on the offense, the only way to take it out is, all right, your knee touches, or any part of your body other than your hand and feet touches the ground, you're down again. Because at that point in time, you can start enforcing it as a late foul, late hit, personal foul, and potentially ejection type of penalties. And that will completely change the mindset of defenders, in those situations. But yeah, it's unless you're going to start putting the onus on the offense here, which is I think that would be the right thing to do here if you're going to actually continue to keep the slide in and try to maintain it and make it better. I think that's what they should do. The slide originally started just because they didn't want to run. They didn't want to run more plays and they wanted to kill the clock. That's how the slide got started. People were afraid of getting hit and they didn't want to take any unnecessary hits late in the game and try to kill the clock. They started sliding. Then all of a sudden it evolved into, quarterbacks get out of the pocket and then they don't want to take a hit. They started sliding. That's it. And then now it evolved into what we have today, where now even doing a fake slide should be a penalty, a la Kenny Pickett, but it's not. Or a late slide should be a penalty, but it's not. And these are things that, like, you saw it in baseball. Now they have rules against sliding incorrectly and trying to take out a defender. And in you mentioned Tom Brady, and it's a perfect example of that. There are many quarterbacks that when they slide, they try to take out the defender. And that's part of the intentional slide, is the intentionally late slide, is you can take out a defender and cause just as much damage to the defender as they can cause to you with a late slide. And that's some people I guess they've never watched baseball in their life, so they don't understand how the slide mechanics work. But guys, it's a sport too, and it's a mechanic of the sport being used in football. It's worth mentioning. And unless you're going to start impacting the offense, take out the entire slide rule. But if you want to actually make a correct rule to try to fix the slide rule, you have to start impacting the offense negatively for any late slides, any intentional slides. Anything Patty's doing, we're trying to give up his body and then turn it upfield and go run 40 yards. No, get it out of the game. At that point in time, it's like when somebody gets their helmet ripped off and they have to call the play dead. Same thing. Should be the same thing. If we're going to actually take care of players and their safety, we need to fix this because this is ridiculous. But also, again, I'm going to keep reiterating this because I think it's important. It is not a one-sided fault here, and especially this Trevor Lawrence situation. It is not one-sided at all.
I will say, I think one thing that could really help with the whole thing too is it's hard to distinguish. You got to be able to distinguish. Basically, once the quarterback tucks the ball, they're not a passer. There is no protection other than the normal ones you get with any other running back. Whether it's Derrick Henry or Trevor Lawrence, they should be in the same basic category at that point, more or less. So Derrick Henry can obviously slide. He can fall down. He can give himself up, all of that sort of thing too. But you can't have.
But why would he want to?
Exactly. I think there's got to be a way to distinguish that between ball carrier and quarterback. Because when you're in the pocket, you're a passer. Quarterback rules, protections. Obviously, that's where we've seen some of those leg injuries and some of the injuries that happen to quarterbacks in the pocket. But once you're outside the pocket, you can't have every nook and cranny going your way, like you mentioned as well. So I do think if you have the slide rule, you can't make contact. You make contact, it's a penalty. Whichever one initiates contact, something like that. Like you do that you run to the sideline, you can't call a penalty if you get blasted running to the sideline, even if it's nip and tuck. I don't care if it's a quarterback, a running back, or receiver. It's got to be treated the same way. We saw it in the 2022 AFC Championship game. Patty's scurrying up the sideline. Joseph Asai for the Bengals cracks him because he thinks he's going to keep going. It ends up being a penalty that costs him the game. And since that point, we see that scurry, turn it upfield. At this point, if you're
just in the season,
unless you're clearly on the white, like both feet and out of bounds, if you're by the sideline, get all the way out. Or if it's close, you got to just accept getting blasted. I feel like there's got to be a way to. Nothing's perfect. It's so bang, bang. I get it. Sometimes you might be thinking about going out of bounds, turn it upfield. But you can't get penalized if you get blasted the one time you don't at the same time. It needs to be very clear, intent, and decisive when you are not continuing to run, when you're giving yourself up when it is done. There can't be any room for this to happen without it being oh my God, you're ejected and suspended the rest of the season. Like let's say Trevor Lawrence slides 5 yards earlier and then he still gets hit like that. Then it's okay. He's done for the year. That's my goodness. That's clear as day. That's Grand Theft Auto level penalties at that point. So I think there's just got to be a way to make it very distinct and distinguished. And if they could split the difference between ball carrier and quarterback, which is hard when the quarterback is the ball carrier, I get it. But a quarterback getting blasted in the open field like that should not be the same as them getting blasted as a passer. And I know it's easier said than done, but I would like it to be something like that in that situation because bad hit, bad decision, unfortunate for everybody. I think that's, and what's worse is the fence afterwards because everyone sees the aftermath like, oh God, that's a UFC or boxing KO at that point, which makes it even worse.
Yeah, look, they already have stickers on there for communicators, right? Put a sticker on any quarterback that wants one. And that sticker means treat me like a baby. That's obviously not what it should mean, but at the same time, you have the quarterback protection rules. I'm thinking like Lamar, Josh Allen, Anthony Richardson. They don't necessarily need those rules.
They
These
need the
guys,
opposite.
yeah, these guys are actively seeking out contact in a lot of cases. And obviously Lamar maybe not actively seeking out contact, but he's not afraid of the contact. Whereas somebody like Trevor
So he
Lawrence,
can avoid it because he likes to make people look stupid. He's
yeah,
seeking to avoid it.
but like Trevor and Tua, when they get out of the pocket, they do need those extra protections because those are two types of quarterbacks. And even Patty, I'll add in that category where these are quarterbacks where they scramble to get their yardage and get down. That's their intention. Their goal is to just get the yardage, and then Patty takes it the next step of, oh, I have you thinking that I'm going to go out of bounds. No, no, no. You've seen me do that before. I'm going to take it upfield. And loss is the art of. Do you remember guys scrambling to get out of bounds as quarterbacks? Just absolutely scrambling to get they will cut it directly horizontal or
90
backward.
degrees.
Yeah, just to get out of bounds before getting touched. And there was none of this like, oh, let me try to sneak a couple of extra yards. No, no, no. It was get out of bounds, get your feet out of bounds, get slowed down, and then get back to the huddle. That should be the logic for every quarterback, but it's not anymore. And part of that becomes this lack of differentiation. I mean, there's already a problem with the slide rule with this whole when the slide starts. What does actually define a slide starting? That's a problem as it's in and of itself. Is we're having guys lose 2 to 3 extra yards when their slide doesn't technically start until later. It's just a whole problem. And now you add this into it. I mean, if you want to really, it sounds silly. It's like a DH rule in baseball. I'm going to keep pulling the baseball analogies here, I guess, today. But how teams can use a DH or not use a DH. It's up to them. I think this is a situation where you kind of have a designated not a runner. And a Nick Foles is a perfect example of somebody who probably shouldn't be out there running. So you put a sticker on him. And when he gets out of the pocket and he does scramble, if he gives himself up and gets hit, that's a penalty. And it's something that's aware, and you can't change it once you announce it during the season. Like, it's done. It's over with. That's all you got. You can't add it to anybody else. Like, you can be quarterbacks and quarterbacks only who can choose to use a sticker. So if you have a guy like Cam Newton and then you have a backup like Brandon Weeden, obviously Brandon Wheaton's not going to be the guy that runs, but Cam is going to be the guy that runs. But you can use it on both if they both chose to for the season. Let's say Cam's coming off a concussion. Maybe he doesn't want to run in the same way. That's obviously I'm using historical facts here, just not current. But I think that's a situation where you could put a sticker on anybody at the season before the season starts, and then that's their rules for a quarterback. Because if we're going to make this change, you're right. I do think it does need to kind of differentiate between a pocket passer and a kind of a running quarterback. I hate using that term because they're quarterbacks first and then they run. But yeah, I don't know what else you can do here. It is crazy to think that we're at that point now where we're strongly. We're not far away from getting into 2-end touch territory here, and that's I think where we kind of, if we want to start talking safety, we all know football has been a dangerous game for a long time, and we start taking out rules that are going to affect that. Now we get in the category of, all right, well, we might as well play flag or 2-end touch or something along those lines. It's an interesting piece. I don't know really where to go with the slide rule, but there's ways you can fix it. I just don't know what the right fix is, to be honest.
The last thing I'll kind of add to that is, as far as quarterbacks want to learn how to get down, how to quote unquote slide, give yourself up. Weirdly enough, one of the best in the game at it right now is Brock Purdy. The way he manages to kind of slide, mostly kind of dive forward, gives himself up, but doesn't leave himself super vulnerable. A lot of struggles this year for the 49ers and him in general. But that's one thing he does very well, and we've seen a lot this year with him scrambling a lot more for his life, is he gives himself up and doesn't take hits very effectively compared to a lot of guys, is for sure. Yeah. We'll jump into the next one too. Quick shout out to our boy Jason from TSS and That Sports Podcast Network as well. Appreciate you dropping in here. Anything for fantasy sports, he's the guy to go to for sure.
Yeah, and the last thing I want to say, yeah, and that's the thing. This is exactly right. This is my point. Is it's hard to take out all these rules if we're going to keep. Like, if we really want to make changes like this, if you really want to protect somebody that's running out of the pocket, you kind of have to start talking about playing soft, and that opens up a whole can of worms. And I don't think anybody who loves football wants that to happen, if we're being honest about it. I don't think we necessarily want to go down that route. Mind you, I'm a big proponent of player safety, mental health, and making sure we start protecting against concussions. But I think there's routes about this that make sense for football, and there's routes about this that you kind of just have to you sign the waiver. It's time type of thing. It's liabilities out the door. We're out here playing like grown men. And I think that's part of all this. I think it's worth
at the end of the day, we're all here to play. We're all here to battle, not play Barbie. So, I mean, you can't exactly take all that out. You can't completely neuter it, especially at a professional level.
Yeah, and also you guys got millions and millions of dollars. Assign them a sliding coach before the season. You know, they literally, like, we all saw Hard Knocks preseason with the Bears this year. They did 1 hour worth of sliding. You know how many times I practiced sliding in my career playing baseball up until college? I practiced sliding literally every day. And was I a good slider? Probably not. Did I know how to slide? And can I slide better than 32 quarterbacks that start in the NFL today? Yes, absolutely I can. You know why? Because I practiced. It should be
maybe
a simple part of your practice.
Russell Wilson's got the baseball background too, so maybe Russell's got you beat still.
Russell, yeah, maybe he's probably the only one, but he's a guy that practices the whole get the heck out of bounds type of situation. He doesn't actually. He'll throw the ball away before he goes and gets a tackle, and we've seen it. Him running past the line and then like, oh nope, I'm gonna throw the ball away, even though I'm past the line of scrimmage. He doesn't care because he doesn't want to take that hit and be lost for his team. And I think that's also part of this. Quarterbacks are worth it. You got to keep them healthy, man. But yeah, hire a baseball coach, man. They literally, there's thousands of them that want a job. I'll do it for not for free. I'll do it for a small chunk of change in your annual budget. That's for sure.
You did mention Hard Knocks, which is a good transition to our next topic. And wasn't it a very great Thanksgiving in that Eberflus household as the Bears, for the first time in their 105-year history, firing a coach midseason as Eberflus is out after another heartbreaking / questionable decision-making / what in the world are we doing? Loss on
Didn't make a decision.
6 losses in a row now for the Bears too after a relatively solid start to the season. Caleb Williams with the new record for rookie pass attempts in a row without an interception on top of that. So it's not like you could blame the losses there. Defense is still pretty solid. Receivers, they kind of rotate who has a good game at this point, but still getting effective as well. It kind of all signs pointed there, and we talked about it last year. He kind of needed to go last offseason. This was inevitable at this point. And they held on like 3 months entirely too long. Maybe really 6 months entirely too long. This was just bound to happen, and you could directly make a case that coaching has cost you at least 3 games this year as far as not using your timeouts in these right situations, just kind of watching it implode. Obviously, Caleb's got to realize there, hey, I can call a timeout too, but 22-year-old, 50-year-old coach. Like you got to know you've been there before. We obviously know that Hail Mary tomfoolery that destroyed DJ's best bets for a month, obviously, too. We also saw the Packers one where he decides not to try and gain yards. Like it's a piling thing for a guy who has never won a road Sunday game on top of it. So this was bound to happen. We even talked about it like 2 weeks ago that he was on the hot seat. Well, now that seat's empty, but obviously we kind of agreed too late. But do you think maybe, we've already talked about this. We won't spend too much time here, but who do you think is going to be the next head coach of the Bears? We'll skip to the fun part. Who's someone you think they should look at next?
I don't know, honestly. I like what they're doing with their OC being stepped into an interim role. And I think we all know that, again, we talk about rule situation in the NFL. The Rooney Rule is in existence. They're required to at least interview a coach, that is not white during the process. I don't think you need to hire to interview a white coach, if I'm being honest. I think you interview and you hire your current OC because, 1, the team rallies around him. That's obvious. That's been obvious. 2, he understands Caleb. Caleb understands him. And you need a younger coach to handle a quarterback like Caleb. And that's not against anything like Caleb, but that's similar to what Jaden Daniels in Washington has to go through with Dan Quinn. Dan Quinn is a young thinker. Dan Quinn handles young players well. There's not a lot of head coaches that can handle a young player well. And we talked about this when Caleb was getting drafted. He is the first of this new generation of quarterbacks, this digital generation of quarterbacks. And you need somebody who can handle that well. And right now there's somebody in-house that you guys have that can handle this well. And I don't see there's any reason this needs to go beyond one interview and one hiring. Because anything beyond that, you're overplaying your hand. And right now the Bears need massive change, but they need change that's still stabilizing. And outside of going and getting Bill Belichick, which obviously is on the table for the Bears, I don't think it's on the table for Bill Belichick, but it's on the table for the Bears. I think that should be worth mentioning, that you just hire in-house. You just have what you get. Don't overthink it. Don't do what the Raiders did. Go and just hire the interim coach that right now seems to be the best bet for your team. And yes, the head coach dropped the ball in Eberflus. well, I shouldn't say he dropped the ball. He didn't do anything, but he just
It
sat
would have
there
helped if he dropped the ball. The clock wouldn't be running.
with the OC on camera on a hot mic telling him to call.
Absolutely. You could tell that Kelcey's mic has gone cold now because he's feeling that. There we go. We got him back. But we on a hot mic
Yeah,
telling him to call a timeout as well.
yeah, just on a hot mic telling him to call timeout. But honestly, just at the end of the day, don't overthink this. Hire in-house. Don't try to go shop out of market right now. Like you need to. There's a lot of rebuilding in Chicago that needs to happen, and
On that
I don't think
line, especially.
Yeah, like, and if I'm being honest, he's an in-town guy. He's an in-house guy. You're not going to pay him the same amount as if you went and tried to go get Bill, which opens up a little bit more to try to get Caleb the help he needs, which allows your head coach the chance to succeed because now you have your star quarterback with talent around him as well. And I don't mean receiver talent. I mean offensive line talent. Let me be very clear. So, yeah.
Okay.
I'll say I just hire in-house. Don't overthink this.
My biggest issue with that is he said since he was promoted to offensive coordinator, he lost 22 pounds because he's been so busy he sometimes forgets to eat. So I'm worried what's going to happen now. I don't know if we're going to get him at the end of the season if this continues now that he's head coach. So assuming his health isn't compromised by it, I don't mind the idea either.
Let's say he gets that head coaching salary, he can hire himself a nutritionist. It'll be okay.
I'll say I think he just needs to hire somebody to remind him to eat, like Sean McVay's guy that pulls him back on the sideline. He just needs a
pullback guy.
He needs a plate full guy at this point.
Yeah.
But
here's a hot dog guy.
Depending on how like the next 5 games go, is let's say they get a little bit of momentum, maybe ruin a game for the Lions, maybe take the 1 seed away from them when they play them the second time because they always play the Lions tough for some reason. Yeah. You play Green Bay again, maybe you get your first win against Green Bay since 2018. If he gets something like that in his next handful of games, I think that will definitely go a long ways for it for sure. If they go 0 for the rest of the way, and then maybe not. But I think he's done everything you could possibly ask for a guy who went from passing game consultant court to now a head coach in 22 days or whatever it was. So I think he's making a good. Obviously, Bill Belichick's always there. Ben Johnson's the hot commodity coach. If he doesn't end up in the place we're going to be talking about here in just a moment, Mike Vrabel's also a really good option who should be a head coach right now. And I think he would keep that offensive coordinator or he'd promote him to offensive coordinator on top of it. Since he's technically interim right now, he'd be like, you're our OC guy. Here you go. Here's money. And then honestly, he might end up getting a little more experience and get himself a fully stabilized head coaching job from there as well. So I really like Mike Vrabel because we know he handles a team very well. And that team, I think, just rallying discipline-wise too. I think those are some of the options. Obviously, if you can get Bill Belichick, that's for all of those same reasons. That's kind of the ideal situation. And if you don't keep Robinson as your OC, let's say he decides to go to greener pastures or whatever, Bill Belichick almost guaranteed comes with Josh McDoufus, who cannot be a head coach and will never be a head coach again. But as an OC, that man could cook under Bill Belichick as an OC. So there are options, and the Bears, they are a hot commodity for someone who wants to be a head coach. I mean, you look at what they have to work with there. You still have Carolina's second-round picks, so you have some extra draft capital. That's basically 2 first-round picks almost. There's something to work with there. So I think they're going to be one of the hot teams this offseason when the head coaching search begins for sure.
I think my only problem with Belichick, and this is just, I don't think he works with that team. And I think for the franchise as a whole, just the structure of the Bears franchise, they have a CEO and a GM and then the head coach. And it's very clear. It's built like a business. It's very structured. Bill doesn't do well with that. Bill needs to be the one in control, so he would need to be GM coach. And I don't think one Hallis Way is ready for a Bill Belichick. I don't think Caleb Williams is ready for a Bill Belichick. I think that team needs something new and needs something unique and not tried and true, because tried and true doesn't work for that franchise. That franchise passing leader is Jay Cutler. Let's not forget that we're talking about a franchise that needs some kind of innovation in it, and they have that in the offense. They have that in the weapons there. They have a building defense. Now you just need a guy to be able to deal with that and put it in the right direction that's not going to tamp down what they're creating. And I think that's an important part of that. Bill Belichick, notoriously bad about giving anybody any free will on their team.
That will be, if they're going to take Bill, it's going to be more or less Bill wanting to go there for sure. So it's not going to them courting Bill. It's going to be Bill being like, I want this because I could do something with this. What do we need to do here? It's going to be Bill wanting that, which would mean him conceding those GM powers and that sort of thing too. Just like, let me just cook the meal, okay, that sort of thing. So,
Yeah.
I
Which
think it would
I don't
definitely
hate
take
the Vrabel idea. I was like, I don't hate the
Mm.
Vrabel idea, but I don't think Ben Johnson does it just because Ben Johnson, I don't think will go in conference or in division. I don't think that happens.
But I do think once we also have plenty of coaches that are yet to be fired too. Maybe
Yeah.
someone like Kevin Stefanski gets a short end of the stick in Cleveland. That's a very good fit in Chicago.
Well, Mike McCarthy might be available.
I don't know if that's a great fit in Chicago. He'll be warm when it's cold at least, but that's about. There's plenty of options. We'll definitely wait and see when we get going. But we did mention Mike Vrabel, and we did that purposely for a reason, as there might be a head coaching vacancy just a couple hours south of him. Ohio State now 4 in a row, if I'm counting correctly, losses to their rival Michigan, loses themselves a chance to be in the Big Ten championship game. Still probably going to make the playoffs, honestly, but it's a much different route than they were going to have before. It could get a lot trickier. Ryan Day might not, honestly, unless he wins a national championship, and even then it still might not matter. It looks like his days in Columbus are over. Maybe Mike Vrabel gets that job because he is an Ohio State alum. Him along with Urban Meyer make arguably the most sense at this point, unless Nick Saban comes out of retirement. Because if you're Ohio State, you can't. I look at them as the opposite of the Bears. They can't really take another gamble on innovation or a young guy. Because last time they did that was a guy who started on third base and it did not work out so far. Since that comment, he has imploded basically in every big game, or at least every game against Michigan. So I think maybe going with tried and true is what Ohio State needs, and I think Vrabel would be a great fit there. Or somebody who's going to look at the roster every time they play Michigan, like, wow, we have an NFL roster with 3 NFL receivers. We should throw them the ball instead of trying to spam halfback dive against 2 first-round defensive tackles, especially with a quarterback who is Tim Tebow, but right-handed. Like, maybe we should utilize what we have a little bit better. But I digress. I do think Ryan Day will be out in Columbus unless they win a natty somehow, and even then it might not matter. But I think he's out, and I think Mike Vrabel is a great fit here. I'll leave it at that, though.
Well, if you've watched the show and we've talked Ohio State at any point in time, you know my opinion on Ryan Day.
Before I continue, I will preface that by saying, unless they accept your application, then you could be the head coach, then Mike Vrabel. I'll get you.
Okay. That would be cool. I'd be all right with that.
I can see the look in your face like, excuse you, sir? You forgot about something.
Yeah, obviously, me being down in Columbus today makes that a little bit more potential. No, I'm just kidding. But no, look, Ryan Day is a guy who, when things get tough, he shuts down. He is Chip Kelly. And by the way, guess what that offense is run by? Ryan Day and Chip Kelly. Guess what happened when things got tough and you got punched in the mouth by your arch rival?
Literally,
you lost
at the end of the game.
Yeah, you literally lost. You also got pepper sprayed at the end of the game. And then while it's all happening, you're watching your star linebacker have a freak out, and you're standing there like you got slapped in the face and you cookies got taken. What? You're a head coach of a top tier, if we're talking prestige star, an 8-star prestige rant team, if you're talking NCAA here. And yes, I harken back to NCAA 14 for that one. Mm-hmm. This team and this school deserves better. And I am not an Ohio State fan.
You're a hater, if anything.
I am 100%. I dislike Ohio State with a burning passion. I am not a Michigan fan either. I hate Michigan more than Ohio State. But you should not let that team up north come into town and beat you again. You are 1-4. 1-4 versus Michigan. Your record against every other team, 65-6. And then you lose 4. You have a winning record across the board against anybody else other than Bama and Michigan. I don't get it. I don't get why these are the teams that put a fear into somebody like Ryan Day. He is an effective offensive coordinator. I do not like him as a head coach, and I have not liked him as a head coach because he shuts down. It is obscene to think that putting Chip Kelly with him, who, by the way, also has always shut down in big games offensively. He literally sucks the life out of his team when things get tough offensively. And thinking that's going to solve the problem. The team was never going to. It was never a concern when Ryan Day was still going to be involved in the offense, because Ryan Day is still going to be the thing that kills that offense. And yes, if he wins a national championship, bravo to you. But I still don't think there's a home for him in Columbus. I don't think it's possible. I think just like we've seen with Auburn, the team I'm a fan of, We've seen it in Notre Dame, losing to USC. What was that? Whittingham, who lost to USC 4 straight times or 3 straight times, didn't even have a 4th year, but he had a winning record against every other team. The team literally lost 2 games a season, 3 games a season, still got fired in 3 years because he could not beat USC. Like, this is the type of things that happen in rivalries. If you can't beat that team, the fans, the alumni, recruits don't want to come and play for you because they want to be in those big games, those big moments, those TV moments, the big noon kickoff. They want to be in that game and they want to win. They want to celebrate. They want to be the ones planting the flag on the middle of the field. They don't want to be the ones having to go fight the team that plants the flag on the middle of the field. And that's, I think, a huge part of this, that I don't care what his record is against every other team in the end of the day, because against the team that matters for Ohio State specifically, you suck. And I don't like saying that because it's not all on a coach. But in this case, every loss has come down to a bad coaching decision by Ryan Day. Multiple bad coaching decisions by Ryan Day, whether it be play calling, whether it be personnel, whether it be unnecessary penalties, things like sending out 12 men on the field or calling 2 timeouts back to back. These are all things Ryan Day has done. And then you lose a game, one of these 4 games you've lost against Michigan, because you had 10 men on the field after a 12 men on the field penalty. Like, you can't make these things up with Ryan Day. And it just gets worse. And Ohio fans, Ohio sports teams fans probably don't deserve a team that keeps losing to Michigan like this, because I can just imagine how bad they hate themselves right now. And I feel bad for them a little bit. But you're still a Buckeye fan, so calm down. But no, look, it's time. Writing's on the wall. He can go get a great offensive coordinating job anywhere else. And I think he'll be successful. I don't think he's a head coach, and I think he's proven that. Just like I don't think Chip Kelly is an effective head coach, and I think he's proven that. I think they're good offensive coordinators, terrible head coaches.
Especially at a school like Ohio State, where the margin of error is so thin. Like those schools, Alabama, now Georgia, like the margin is too thin for that. When you're, I don't want to say blue blood because that's cheesy and that's more for basketball, but you get the point. Like those schools with
Texas,
that 5-star prestige, Texas, USC,
Oklahoma, even Oklahoma couldn't do that.
Exactly. Like there's the margin of error is too thin, and just to pile onto it just a little bit, because that's what I'm here for, is to add even more injury to injury. The second time in the entire series that an unranked Michigan team beat a ranked Ohio State team. First time in 74 years. And then on top of that, they are now 0-4, as you mentioned. The first home loss versus an unranked opponent since 2014, 10 years, 54-game winning streak, and then a 13-game home winning streak on top of it. First time they've lost multiple games to Big Ten opponents in the same season in 13 years, since 2011. And then, of course, as you mentioned, the first Ohio State coach since I think it was 1988 to lose to Michigan 4 straight games. Ever since he said he was going to hang 100 on him, I don't think he scored 100 all combined at this point. So I think it's amazing how Jim Harbaugh's comment about being born on third base literally broke him when it comes to this game, which is the game that matters. And you've had a better team at least 3 of those, I'd say. Maybe not last year because that Michigan team was loaded last year. But those other 3 losses, you can make a case Ohio State's roster was better top to bottom. If for no other reason, C.J. Stroud, Marvin Harrison, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Jackson Smith, and Jigba, going on and on. I could list the NFL roster if we want at this point.
Yeah. You have 12 deep at a receiver position in the NFL. You have 10 deep at a corner and linebacker position, and 40 deep at offensive line and defensive line. Like, take your pick there. Yeah, there's no reason. And I'll just leave it with this. Look at every successful college coach. What do they all have in common? When it comes down to big moments, they are calm, cool, and collected. They don't get flustered by commentary outside of a game. What does Ryan Day do? He claims he's going to hang 100 on his arch rival and gets flustered and tries to get pissed off every time and gets red in the face, and it's very clear every time he gets in a big situation. And he starts pointing fingers.
Snapped at Lou Holtz last year after the Notre Dame game.
Yeah. No player, and especially now, no player wants to go play for a coach that they can't trust in the biggest moments to keep it together. Because if their coach isn't keeping it together, why should I keep it together is going to be what's in their mind. And that's just the last thing I want to leave on, because for me, that's, if I'm looking to play in a team, I want a coach that I know at the end of the day, he'll have my back, but he's going to make the best decision to get us a W. Because at the end of the day, all I care about is a win. In college especially, I want to get more wins than the other team so I can make the playoff, so I can be on the big stage, so I can then make my opportunity to get to the NFL. And if my coach can keep us calm and make those right decisions, that's when I know that's the team I want to go for. And Ryan Day can't do that. Chip Kelly also cannot do that, and they have proven that. And that's my biggest concern that comes with both of those two.
It's crazy that they haven't won that game since Justin Fields' last year playing quarterback. That's how long it's been. Like, we've had an entire COVID pandemic over since then, basically. Like, it's been a long time coming. But in this, speaking of Justin Fields, a Heisman Trophy finalist, we're also going to talk about the Heisman Trophy of this year. As you know what, the Heisman Trophy race, according to the betting odds, it's all but locked up at this point. It looks like it is Travis Hunter's award, and there's nothing to it. Yeah. However, the other guy in that race, Ashton Jeanty, does have a game in about 48 hours or so. So there's a chance, and he's 300 or so yards away from Barry Sanders' record, putting that team on his back that is now in the playoff, depending. I'm curious, do you think this Heisman race should be, quote unquote, over like the odds say it is? Do you think this is Travis Hunter's going away? Or do you think it should be a little bit closer? Do you think where maybe Ashton Jeanty's getting overlooked just a touch by everybody besides a super football nerds?
I think that I've said this last time. I made the case for Ashton Jeanty. He is not doing this versus air. He's doing this against grown college athletes in Division I football. And he is dominating them in the likes we have never seen before. Well, even looking at the record, there has been no other player to put up more than 150 yards or 135, as we looked it up last time, more than 135 yards and one touchdown in every single game of a season. There has yet to have been a player until Ashton Jeanty.
I want to also add, too, he played the number one team in the country in Oregon, 192 yards and 3 touchdowns. So it's not like he's just beating up on tomato cans. Like, you played the best team in the country, and you dropped that on them. Washington State, you had 4 touchdowns and 260. And Oregon State, 226 and a touchdown. I get it. He's not doing it in the SEC or the Big Ten. Oh, darn. I get he's still beating up on these major college programs in a way that is historic and has them in the playoff and ranked number 10 right now, I believe. And if they win in 48 hours, which they're favored to, they will be a playoff team with a bye exclusively off of his back. Because can you name anybody else on Boise State?
Can I? Yes, but I was like, I don't want to name it because I'm the super nerd that you just referenced earlier that probably spends too much time trying to look for another reason to root for Boise State. And I still, mind you, all the time I've watched them, I still can't find another reason to root for Boise State other than the fact they have blue turf and have cool uniforms and Ashton Jeanty. Those are the reasons why I can root for that team is Ashton Jeanty and the uniforms and jersey and the turf. That's it. Like,
which means we're on the same page with that too. And I'm going to add on to that. Madsen, there's a name. The quarterback, he has 2,500 yards and 21 touchdowns on the season with 3 picks. That's a very good season. Jeanty has 2,288 yards and 28 touchdowns on the ground. That is how much the offense has funneled through him. Receiving, he has 102 yards and a touchdown on top of it. It is exclusively offense run through Ashton Jeanty. Are they winning a national championship? No, we're not getting to that point. That's not what the Heisman's about. We're talking about individual excellence. Travis Hunter has been awesome. Like, there's no doubt about it. My concern is you can't have your biggest thing be your snap count. That can't be your quote-unquote Heisman moment. He's been awesome. He's been really good at corner and receiver. I don't think you could say he's been number 1 at either one of them or even number 2 necessarily. He's been awesome at both. He's the best player coming out in the draft, arguably. But that's not what this award is. This is the Heisman Trophy. And Ashton Jeanty has been the best running back I've seen in college football since Adrian Peterson. And that's not even a shot at Derrick Henry or any of those guys because they were all awesome. I think Ashton Jeanty might be the most dominating running back I've seen since him, especially when you look at he's doing it at Boise State. And I don't want to hear just the competition because he did it to Oregon, the best team in the country that actually is known for having a good defense. You think Dan Lanning's going to let that defense be soft? No. And Ashton Jeanty still did it. So Travis Hunter deserves the award. Ashton Jeanty deserves the award. That's where I look at it at this point. I think Ashton Jeanty should get it if I was a voter. If you're telling me Travis Hunter is going to win it, I'm not going to go into that whole. I have no argument really against it, if that makes sense. My concern is the fact that the odds have it wrapped up at like minus 5,000 when Jeanty still has a game to play.
Yeah, minus 6,000, by the way, for Travis.
Even worse than I was, Joe. Even worse than my exaggeration. Like, This race should not be over yet when one of them still has an important game to play, a conference championship game to play, while the other one does not. I know that technically probably shouldn't play a factor into it. You know what? Yeah, it should. It's the bowl games that don't play a factor into. Never mind. I can't think it's late. But yeah, this should have it. If Jeanty drops 300 yards and breaks the record and 4 touchdowns, there is absolutely no way in heck that he should not get the award, in my personal opinion. When you break a record that has stood for longer than, I think, since about as long as you've been alive, if I'm not mistaken. Actually, longer than you've been alive, now that I think about it, because
wow, geez, guy.
I had 92 stuck in my head, but that's why. So I'm sorry. I was like 88 when it happened. For some reason, the number 92 is stuck in my head. Sorry, I just dated Kelcey, everybody. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
However, my point.
I appreciate it.
94. So we're both old here. There's some salt in this pepper right now.
I don't want to turn my head to the side. There's a nice gray streak over here.
My point being, everybody, is that it's been longer than we have been alive. I'm used to saying the audience because we're usually the old guys, but it's even older than that, a record that he'd be breaking. So let's just – Travis Hunter deserves it, but Ashton Jeanty deserves it too, and this race should not be over, but it looks like it is already over to this point. It's kind of frustrating. And then the little packet things that they posted that Colorado sent to the Heisman voters, I'm going to just say that was cheesy, and that made me throw up a little in my mouth.
I don't hate it. I'll be honest. I'm okay with the PR package. I think that's fine. But
Heisman, I can't do that. You can't put both of them in there because that means you got none. You got 2 quarterbacks, no, you got none. It's that adage again.
I think that if that was coming from Boise State, it's 10 times better. I think coming from Colorado, it was cheesy, but I don't hate it still. Couple things. One, Travis Hunter, yes, best athlete probably in the college football game today. I don't think there's any doubt. Being able to play two sides of the ball is like being able to play 2 sports, and the fact that your mentality has to change on both sides of the ball. You can't do the same thing on both. Problem is, Travis doesn't necessarily change the mentality while playing corner. Just comes down to tackling and lack of tackling. He's a good corner. He is a top 25 corner in the draft coming up. He is a top 10 receiver in the draft coming up. But the number 1 running back we've had in over a decade is currently playing football and still has 1 regular season game to go. And I don't think there's any doubt that Ashton Jeanty should win this. It's crazy to think that he's being knocked out. And again, if we compare apples to apples here, look at the surrounding cast for Colorado. It is a bunch of kids that deserved a chance in the NFL. Look at the surrounding cast, especially that offensive line at Boise State. These guys,
good football players, not at the same level.
Absolutely. They will make great EFL players and great practice squad players. And I don't mean that in the slightest bit of just, being rude. Talent is what talent is. There's a reason they're at Boise State and not at Alabama at the end of the day. And unfortunately, when it comes to drafting players, they draft from Alabama and Notre Dame. They don't draft from Boise State for offensive line. It sucks. It's the fact of the matter. So you compare those two, and Ashton Jeanty, what he's doing against what he's doing is insane. And again, I'll reiterate it. It's just absolutely asinine to think that people look at Boise State and they're like, they're those Smurfs on the blue turf. It's not that team. That team hasn't existed since early 2000s. Since Zimbrowski. Yeah, that's there it is.
Statue of Liberty.
Yeah, against Oklahoma, in the Fiesta Bowl. And since that game, this is not the same Boise State. This Boise State has produced tons of coaches that have gone on to bigger programs, that have been successful at bigger programs. It's produced tons of players that have been successful in the NFL, and now as coaches, Kellen Moore being number 1 of that. Like, there is so much talent that comes out of Boise State from just pieces and parts. It's never a whole team. Never one whole team from Boise State, but there's always a good player they find, a diamond in the rough, if you will, that deserved an opportunity. And it's the SEC and ACC's fault that there's not an Ashton Jeanty currently playing, or a Big 12, because he's from Texas. I don't know how you let a guy like that get out of the state of Texas, considering there's 5 D1 schools, 6 D1 schools in that state. How do you do that? I don't know. But anyways, the guy goes to Boise State, has a chip on his shoulder, and shows exactly how good he can be. The Heisman is not about the best athlete. The Heisman is about the best college football player. And the best college football player this year is Ashton Jeanty. And I think does Travis deserve some sort of award for what he's doing? Absolutely.
Multiple awards.
That's the top 5 draft pick you're going to get in April next year.
Maybe number 1.
That's his reward for how good he actually is.
You can give him the Litnikoff Award or the Top Corner Award or something. Yeah. You can give up every other piece of hardware if you want.
take it. I don't care. But Heisman, I'm sorry. We've seen it given away. Mark Ingram being the biggest definition of a guy who didn't deserve it, who got it because he had it. They needed to make a record, make a point on a record because Alabama at that time had no Heisman Trophy winners, and they gave it to Mark Ingram and not Toby Gerhart. Similar situation, lower tier school, better stats for the guy from the lower tier school, and then the difference is this guy went to Alabama and that guy just won a national championship, and then the other guy did not win a national championship but was the best running back in the college football game.
It's interesting when we look at it too because we're looking at the Big 12 and the Mountain West. We're not comparing it to being like the Division II versus the SEC. It's not like their competition's relatively comparable by comparison.
Yeah, they're playing teams that were part of the same division last year.
Like there's a lot of overlap there. Like Oregon State, Washington State, like there's a lot of overlap there. This isn't Big 10 compared to FCS or something ridiculous like that. Like this, and I don't like to even use the competition comparison like that because it's a little cheesy in my opinion. Dominance is dominance at this level. And we already mentioned he played the number one team in the country and had 200 yards and 3 touchdowns. So and you lost by 3 points. Like you lost so many people money that day because they covered the spread. Anyway, that's speaking of covering the spread too. We can go off on this forever. We're already going long today. Kelcey, the greatest gamble is back after a Turkey Day break, and you know what? I think there's only a handful of games for you to pick from. So where are we going here?
Yeah, so I have nothing but championship games to pick from. So like usual, I'm sticking with something a little bit close to the vest here, trying to get a little split odds here. I've had a tough run of it though. BYU let me down the last time I made a pick, putting my record at 5-6-1 on the year. Ironic for a coin flip that I'm sitting around 50%. Does not get old. But this week, I'm going with a team from Texas. That's them SMU Mustangs. I think they're going to beat Clemson in the ACC championship game. 135 spread, or minus 135 for the money line, minus 2.5 points for the spread. Very close matchup there, but it is worth mentioning that SMU, that team just looks really good here. And I have a hard time overlooking them. They've been a good team. You know, they're not far removed. Plus, Rhett Lashley, I believe in this situation. So, yeah, be sure to give this one a look for your coin flip, and hopefully I'm back to 500.
I got to agree with you, especially like Clemson is here, obviously, but they're here thanks to a different team that wears orange in Syracuse, taking out Miami, who kind of choked out in the stretch. So SMU earned the spot. They have been awesome all year. So I agree. I will be betting SMU. That is for sure. I think they will. I like them to win this game. And it is a conference championship game because that is all we have this week, which is a good segue into our main event. And for the main event, we already kind of started with it. We are talking conference championship games this week. We got a slate of them. We got 2 on Friday and 4 on Saturday. We'll go and take a quick look at the schedule right now. As you mentioned, we do have Clemson and SMU on Saturday. On Friday, we got Kelcey's Tulane taking on Army, UNLV taking on Boise State with Ashton Jeanty. I'll keep the Boise State one easy. Boise State wins that one, in my opinion. I presume same with you. We won't spend any more time there. Ashton Jeanty, Heisman Trophy campaign incoming. Army Tulane. This one's fun for me because we were both a component of Army, and we want them to keep going. The problem is Tulane is your team when it comes to betting.
Yeah. I have a hard time with this one, honestly. I've looked at this one. I was going to pick it for the coin flip, but I can't logically pick one. Tulane, by the way, the favorite in this, even though Army ranked 24th and has had a great season. I think Army is so good, it's hard to overlook them. But man, Tulane, something about this team and this quarterback continues to just, they got a new guy, they got a new coach, they have a new this, they have a new that, and this team continues to end up in an American Athletic Championship game. And screw it, I'm gonna say Tulane. I'm going to go with the favorite here. I'm going to say Tulane.
They're not going to let you down this time, right? So this will be the one for sure. But next up, we have the game that you just mentioned. We got SMU taking on Clemson. And you already mentioned that you have SMU winning. I'm going to go in the same boat. I like SMU as well. I'm just going to keep it quick and simple. I agree with you on that one. So we'll move on to the next one. Big 12, Iowa State taking on Arizona State. The matchup we all anticipated when we hear Big 12 championship game 2 years ago. How are we feeling, Kelcey? What are we feeling here?
You know what? I like this matchup. It's two teams that I think are just dogs. Me personally, I'm going to say Iowa State. I think the Cyclones, I've always liked the Cyclones a little bit more than Iowa in that type of matchup. So I'm going to say screw it. I'm going Iowa State because why not at this point in time?
I really like Rocco at quarterback. I hate Iowa State when it comes to covering the spread as a favorite, but I do like them to win games like this. Arizona State is very good. They've gone on a nice run, especially surprising people down the stretch. I still think Iowa State's just a touch better. Like a field goal game here, something like that. I think they find a way to win and not shaft themselves like they've done in a few other games recently. But next up, you could make a case for this being the biggest game of the year. I would say the biggest game of the week, arguably. Like it's an absolute doozy. We got Penn State taking on Oregon, number 1 versus number 3 for the Big Ten championship. What a doozy of a game. So, Kelcey, how are we feeling?
This one is very interesting because, fun fact, if Penn State wins, they get the automatic bye for being the Big Ten winners. And Oregon would still go to the playoffs, which is the best case situation for me because that means Alabama does not go to the playoffs. Also means Ohio State might get bounced, which is even more fun to talk about. So, yeah, I'm not going to say Penn State. I'm going to say Oregon. But, I do want to point that out, that Penn State opportunity there. By the way, I still think the biggest game is Boise State because either they go to a first-round bye in the playoff or the LA Bowl with Gronk. Those are the two options. If you lose the game, you go to the LA Bowl. You win the game, you're in the playoffs.
All right, they have the biggest potential margin for error either way. I'll say this was arguably the biggest game with head-to-head matchup, but I think Penn State might still make it even if they lose, as long as they don't get absolutely blasted. But like you said, they're going to find a way to finagle in Alabama if they lose. They're going to find a way to – Alabama's already weirdly finagled in there. I still think James Franklin is Ryan Day, with a slightly less NFL roster at this point. These are the type of games, unfortunately, that they just come up a little short in. And until I see it, I can't reasonably pick it. And Dan Lanning is arguably the best coach in college football right now, not including legacy. We're talking just this year. So Georgia, everyone, don't come from my head. I'm talking about just this year. And honestly, we kind of joked about this when we did the preview them versus Ohio State. Ohio State beats them in literally everything except coach and quarterback. And those two guys, they make it so they can compete with anybody. And by the way, they probably have like the 5th best roster in college football. It's not like they're doing with a deficit. They got some ballers.
Maybe better.
They might even be top 3. I might be shortchanging them a bit.
They do have the number 3 candidate for Heisman right now.
Like they are absolutely awesome. So I'm going to take Oregon as well until somebody beats them. At the same man. Until somebody beats them, I'm going to roll with them. And last but not least, we have Kelcey's favorite and least favorite conference. We got the SEC. As we got a rematch with Georgia taking on Texas, a rematch from about a month ago when Georgia kind of smacked the face off of Texas and gave Texas their first and only loss. History repeat itself, or does Texas arguably knock Georgia almost out of the playoff?
Dude, Georgia should have lost. I'll say Georgia should have lost to Georgia Tech. Let's not kid ourselves on this one. Haynes hands that ball off. And it's a whole different situation right now. We're talking about Texas A&M playing in this game versus Texas instead of Georgia. So, no, I think this is a situation where Georgia has not been playing well, and I hate to say it, but they kind of continue that. And Texas, in their year 1 of being in the SEC, I hate to admit this, has come out and just beat the crap out of the SEC. And it's been fun to watch. I'll be honest, that offense is fun. I am concerned about Quinn Ewers' ankle. Obviously, that showed itself a little bit in the last game. But if they put Arch Manning in, I'm going to say it's going to be Texas 100%. I'm not concerned about Arch Manning coming in at any point in time in this game to match up with Georgia. Georgia's team is really good, but there's been far too many suspensions and injuries and things like that, and just bad play by Carson Beck, who continues to disappoint every Georgia fan that I know. And it makes me happy every day that I get to say that Carson Beck is still not and will never be a top 10 quarterback in college football today. It's just not. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Georgia fans. I know you had a lot of hopes, but just like every other Georgia quarterback that's supposed to be great that you end up shipping off somewhere else, doesn't happen here with Carson Beck. So Texas is my chance for the SEC here, just because I can't stand if Georgia wins a title.
Maybe top 10 in the SEC, maybe, but that's where we'll get Carson Beck. It's maybe a top 10 quarterback in the SEC, and that's a maybe even. Like that's cutting it close. He's cutting it real close with Auburn's quarterback as well, with being in that top 10. Peyton Thorne and him fighting for that 10 spot. Who would have thought?
My money's on Peyton Thorne, if I'm being honest.
You know what? I don't hate it, but I'm also leaning with Texas, although I do. It's weird because you look at like Texas' record against those top 5 teams, what it was the first time they played, and how Quinn Ewers had never really done well against. The problem is Georgia's not a top 5 team necessarily right now. I know I don't really care about the ranking with them. I'm mostly saying, like, when you've lost that many games, it's hard to put you in that same category. So it's still Georgia. I don't want to rule them out. And I think they are ranked number 5, excuse me. So I guess they still qualify for that. But I'm still
They'll
going to
still
take
make the
Texas.
playoff if they win.
Like,
if they lose.
yeah, I think I'm still going to take Texas. I think they'll come in with a little extra something to prove with it. And I do think Georgia is kind of reeling a bit. That Georgia Tech game, like you mentioned, Georgia Tech's weirdly tough this year, but it should not have taken 8 overtimes. Like, you can't let that happen. That can't happen. So I'm gonna take Texas, whether it's Arch Manning or Quinn Ewers or both of them. I think they'll find a way. I think Steve Sarkisian will be in his absolute bag for this game.
Yeah.
I think there's going to be a sense of redemption after that first one. I guarantee that first game has a sour taste in their mouth. So I know they can't still be happy about that one.
But Kirby is Kirby. I will say that as well. As much as Kirby has a knack, and this is one thing that we talk about with coaches in college football that sometimes comes up here is Kirby has a knack of taking a team who's facing adversity and turning them into a monster. So it wouldn't surprise me. Yeah, I'll say it wouldn't surprise me if he pulls a crazy turnaround here and gets this team back to playing the way they did against Texas the first time, and wins this game. But I'm not going to change my answer. But yeah, it's still just something to kind of throw out there that Kirby Smart is that good of a coach. I don't want to take anything. All my slander against Carson Beck has nothing to do with how good Kirby Smart is. Kirby Smart is a fantastic coach.
For all the reasons you said, I agree, and why this is the game I won't be placing a bet on. Penn State, Oregon, I'll find a bet that I like. Iowa State, Arizona State, I'll find something. SMU, Clemson, I'll find something. There is nothing about Georgia and Texas that I like. Because right where I'm at, I don't believe I have the prop bets for them, like player bets. But as far as quarters, halves, spread, there is nothing with this game I really want to try out. Like
it is right now a -140 Texas favorite, plus 120 Georgia. So it's basically negligible in betting here.
It's negligible there. The over-under I don't want to touch because it could be a game where the defenses show up and Carson Beck throws picks, or the Texas offense comes out flying. I'm not touching this game with any bets, but that's what we're looking at for this conference championship weekend. A lot of really good games. Be sure to let us know in the comments down below what ones you were looking at.
I'll say watch out for that MAC championship game, Ohio versus Miami of Ohio.
Looks like they won't have to go very far, will they? Like that's quite the matchup as well. But you take Miami or you take Ohio or you take.
I think they play that game in Indy, if I'm not mistaken.
I think because I think the Big Ten championship is in Chicago, if I'm not mistaken. So
no, Big Ten is also in Indy. Oh, that's right. Yeah, they don't play that in Indy. Where is the man? We'll figure that out.
Either way, that is going to be fun. The Battle of Ohio, part 16 this year. I guess it feels like we're including all sports, but that's going to wrap it up for the main event.
Oh, sorry, it's in Detroit, by the way. 2 Ohio teams playing in Michigan.
Yeah, that feels like a war crime of some kind. Like somebody needs to be punished for this. I don't know whose decision this was, but send them to the Geneva Convention. But that's going to wrap up the main event and take us into Kelcey's favorite part of every show, and that is Crunch Time. For Crunch Time, I'll just keep mine short and sweet. Those of you who are Fisticuffs fans, there was no MMA Mondays this Monday, in part because I was under the weather and having trouble speaking. And part 2 is we're going to do a full prediction from bottom to the top. Start on Friday. We'll be releasing that video. From the first prelim to the final main event, we'll be picking every single winner. Take a look at some of the betting odds and things like that. I want to see the weigh-ins first. I want to see if there's been a couple short notices in there, a few tweaks and turns, a few newcomers. I want to see if anyone looks like death at the weigh-ins. I want to see if anyone looks rejuvenalized. I want to go with that before we make the prediction. So Friday evening, expect that full predictions video from the bottom to the top. We're going to see if we can see what record we can get on that one because there's some very interesting fights I'm looking forward to.
I'm glad you said that, and I'm glad that's your crunch time because I do want to throw a question out there to you. What was the best rivalry week fight you saw out of all of them? Was it Michigan-Ohio State? Are you going to pick the easy one, or are you going to go with one of the fun ones?
I'm thinking that one might be the best one just because it was the longest, I felt like. Because it set the standards. Everyone after that was kind of, for lack of better terms, on tilt. So they were ready to get in the way quicker. That one, they brought out pepper spray for that one. So that's kind of the safe one. I think Texas and Texas A&M, if Steve Sarkisian let that one play out, that one could have matched it because I think they were all ready to fight right there, but it was nipped in the butt pretty quickly. There was one other one. I can't remember off the top of my head, but there was another one.
State.
Was that?
North Carolina State.
That's the one. I think that one and the Ohio State, Michigan one, I think those are the two at the top. I think North Carolina State did more in a shorter amount of time, but Ohio State, Michigan, there's drug. They drug so far where everybody not named Brian Day was involved.
Yeah. I only asked that question because I want to say this. If you don't like somebody planting the flag on the center of your field, beat the shit out of them next time, and not after the game. Do it during the game, and then you don't have to worry about it. That's all I got to say about that situation. Otherwise, do it like Auburn, Alabama did, and do it on the sidelines during the game. That's fine too. That was quite entertaining, nonetheless. Nobody got hurt in that one.
It's really that simple. Is it kind of cheesy? I don't love the flag planting, sure. But at the same time, it's your job to stop it. In a physical, combative sport where you are fighting for 60 minutes, you got to show the fight in there too. Especially,
and nobody's damaging the turf. It's fine.
It's fine. It's a little rude, if anything. Like, it's a little rude. That's about all you can get for it. But if you don't like it, you have 60 minutes to fight them.
Yeah. By the way, shout out Arizona State for the spear in the middle of the Arizona field. That was hilarious. That was the calmest of all the battle royales. He just plants it in the middle of the field, and the guy picks it up and just like, no.
Exactly.
That was entertaining.
And if you're Ohio State, next year you have the chance to do it yourselves. So those of you who are still around, go try and win and plant it in Michigan, then we'll get another fight. But the circle continues. But that's going to do it here for us on the High Low Sports Podcast. A longer show than we anticipated, but we are glad that you all stuck around to hang out with us and talk about what's going on in the wide world of sports. Be sure to check out all of our social media pages. We are also on the Blue Sky now, High Low Sports Podcast, same as everything else. Go check us out there because we need followers. I'm trying. The skies are still a little gray out there, but we're going. But we appreciate y'all for hanging out with us, and we'll see you all again next week.